hip-hop needs to be preserved as part of our heritage.
Nomadic and just divine, a two-piece combo. He on the percussion and me on the convo. Take you on a track through the mind of a master. Just give me a sec, I set it off right after the beat drops.
Some people say that she's dead, but she never died. She just buried herself deep inside, away from the hustling wannabes, bright lights of gangsterism gannabes, loud noises and voices of egos, now devoid of original heroes. She longed for the call of the wild star, for her music to evolve as a lifestyle. Now the task is upon all the shoulders of true school, innovating soulful soldiers. They stand up and rise like a phoenix, for the love of our mutual feelings. I got into hip-hop in the early 80s with electro music. Morgan Carmel put out the Street Sounds album. It was actually Electro 4 that spoke to me the most, man. It had like Breaking in Space on it by Colonnade, which is just an incredible tune. And I learnt my breaking moves to that, I learnt my windmills to that, and listened to it. I used to rinse that tape out until it was broken, man, because it was just an incredible, incredible mix of music. Run DMC Sucker MCs, which was the one that got me into it, man. I used to listen to that, you know, Run and DMC's lyrics. I memorised them, you know, and that was the kind of introduction to start writing.
I'm DMC, in the place to be. I go to St. John's University, and since kindergarten I acquired the knowledge. And at the 12th grade I went straight to college. I'm light skinned from Hollis, Queens, and I love eating franks and pork and beef. I dress to kill, I love the style. I'm an MC, you know who's worth your watch.
You know, we passed those cassettes around and friends would take DJs, like Red Alert from New York and stuff, and we'd have Chuck Chill Out and early like mixtapes, man, and we'd listen to all of those, you know. And over here we had Mike Allen with his National Fresh show, which was on every regional local station that, you know, we'd listen to and get all the early rap releases.
A child is born with no state of mind, blind to the ways of mankind. God is smiling on you, but he's frowning too, because only God knows what you'll go through.
This is pre-internet era, man, so it was all word of mouth. It was exchanging demos and tapes and mixtapes, man, you know, and then vinyl, yeah. We loved it, man. For me, it started off breaking and then evolved into doing tags and stuff around town, and then, you know, the odd piece, so then it was rap, you know. For me, I was drawn to the mic.
Live for the culture, yeah, you know that. Breaking to the beat of a b-boy rap track. We don't quit to hit stereotypical villains that cause us to rock rhythms. Understand what we've created. Wait the dead, yet we're underestimated. On a course with the force of the furious, to keep them curious.
Distributors wouldn't touch UK hip-hop for a long time. They always thought it was just a carbon copy of America, you know? It was like this fad. Question everything. Who knows what shapes are shifted? What's been told or hate the scripted? Who knows what lies they feed us elitists, ruling world elites? Yeah, I'm with conspiracy, cause some things I see don't sit with me. Is this world stage, corner, gag, battle and rage? I look at, you know, a lot of majority artists today, and I'm a little bit let down, and honestly, I have been for a long time, because it just still feels to me like they're still trying to copy this wannabe gangster thing. Losing the ground beneath us to walking zombies, grimace sweepers. I'm sick of these clowns, from the top of the pyramid down to the ground. Who knows what's happening? If we weren't there in the scene of the crime, these acts of terror, orchestrated by government terrors. Mad dogs can't wait to bite, bound in chains inside their brains. The media know this, enforcing fear till it turns explosive. You've got to look at the history of hip hop, man. It's street culture, you know. gangster rap was a small percentage.
It's like a subgenre.
You had Schoolie D, you had Just Ice, original gangsters. You know, they were like 10% of hip hop culture back then in the late 80s. You know, I mean, they were rapping about the guns and the drugs and all this, but there was still, you know, you had conscious rappers dropping lyrics, man. You had funky rappers, you had funny rappers, you had cosmic rappers, you had all sorts of different, you know, artists trying to come through with something fresh and innovative. It's just the way that the capitalist world runs. Yeah. Grabbing hold of a spoken word and pimping it, you know, which is a way that they make their money by watering it down, talking about consumerism, materialism, stuff that keeps people sick. Do you know what I mean? Unfortunately, the world we live in society is sick. Society has to hold a little bit of responsibility because it does feed children rubbish, you know. And unfortunately, if you're a mainstream consumer, you're just going to turn on your radio, one or whatever it is, and you're going to hear the music that represents that. And that is artists who have just been signed because they look a certain way, speak a certain thing, dance a certain way, just like puppets. You know, it's all orchestrated. The whole music industry is pretty sinister. If you're an artist and you know it, and you've got half a brain, and you're not even an artist, you know, just a fan of music, you know what's real and what's not, what's BS and what's real. You know, there's that saying hip hop always had about keeping it real. It's like we know it, you know, real recognises real. The masses, I don't think they're ever going to get it, man. I've lived in hope and I've worked with different people trying to bring through some conscious music. I worked with Jester on a project, the U3, you know, Jersey's making some, you know, some nice earthly beats, man, some cosmic vibes, and I was writing some conscious lyrics about a singer, trying to bring in a nice bit of soulful element. We had some instrumentation. People were kind of digging it, but we knew as artists we'd never be able to sustain that project because people don't want it, unfortunately. We loved it, but you know what I mean? That's the sad reality of being an artist.
Life is precious and worth more than money is. Looking to the future and thinking of what will come of this. Maybe none of us are meant to see the road ahead. Maybe we're designed to live in the present instead.
I just don't go to these hip-hop things because I'm just so bored of it. I'm like, first shut up, tell me something. Tell me something that's going to give me, do you know what I mean? Something that I've been buying this shit for more than 30 years. I know what's good. Don't tell me something that's a crock of shite unless you haven't lived it and it's real. Do you know what I mean? That's it. I just get so wound up sometimes. I'm like, mate, I don't want to know you. Well, I'd like to see it stop by the time they reach 19, at least. Do you know what I mean? If they're putting out tunes publicly, they should really have something to say and really want to push an art form. Because otherwise it's just disrespectful. Not to themselves, they're just clowning around, but to a culture that has an ability to touch people and get across a message and get across a vibe and get across something that stimulates you and get you through your fucking shit day. Do you know what I mean? It's like too much whackness, man.
We'll keep it on. Rock the house. Keeping it on. Rock the house. I keep it on. Rock the house. Keeping it on. Rock the house. I keep it on. Rock the house. Keeping it on. Rock the house. I keep it on. Rock the house. Keeping it on.
It all started when I got into watching a lot of the turntable lists featuring the DMC videos. So literally the early 90s, the likes of sort of Prime Cuts, Rock Radar, all the old classic sort of hip hop DJs compete on that level, and was just totally inspired by what they did on a set of decks. And for me at that point, I knew that hip hop was going to be a style of music that I really needed to experiment with. So yeah, at the age of 18 or so, got a set of decks and locked myself away for about a year or so, like a proper sort of hermit, and got to learn how to use the turntable as an instrument, basically. You know, developed various scratching techniques, doing a lot of beat juggling. And certainly on the south coast, in Brighton, the hip hop scene has always been, you know, quite apparent. There's a lot of DJs representing, you know, the style of music, a lot of MCs, but in Worthing, that hasn't really picked up until very recently. Certainly as part of the Getting Together promotion, we've got a really good sort of collective going there of, you know, performing artists, DJs, break dancers. So for me, I mean, it's just great that, you know, having lived in Worthing for so many years, we've actually now got a really good scene going there.
We'll just get straight into scratching, which essentially you need a break, which is this record here playing. You need a sample record, which will enable you to make a sound and scratch with, okay?
mean, the event personally for me was a big success. You know, we had a lot of people turn up, certainly in the day as well. A lot of people that live locally that probably didn't have an understanding of hip hop culture. Because of the location, you know, walking by, created a really good buzz and atmosphere, and people just in general, you know, wanted to get involved with that.
Leaders of the new school society, you know what I'm saying? Strong Island, coming decent, uptown, you know, we chilling with the state, love KCR, respect. We doing things nice with my man Bob Garcia, and my man Curious George. We got Joe around me, the tribe, you on the right side, we're gonna get busy like this. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, y'all. Never leave the rocket, keep busting up our song. People use the rhythm on the track, niggas out, no skinny roll. Give us a scratch, that's right. Coming up, no, guarantee the beat rough. I'm showing you the bust, the vibes, never bluff. Puff, puff, like a magic dragon. Pull up the doors, it's a bit.
I was a 90s kid, but it was the same, like cassettes and shit. I got mad into Rage Against the Machine, like, and then from there, like Beastie Boys, and just like tapes. I used to take like Wu-Tang tapes. There was like hardly anyone at my school that liked hip hop. It was all kids into rave music, and I hated it. And I hated all the chart shit. And yeah, it was just like two kids that were into like metal and rap. And like, they gave me that first little slice. Like, oh, what is this? And just, yeah, just got hooked on it. And then just like skate videos as well. Just like started skateboarding, and you know, skate videos would have all the great soundtracks, man. The great like, you know, Zoo York mixtape.
Big shot on the East Coast. Big shot on the East Coast. Big shot on the East Coast.
Yeah, I tried everything. Like, tried a bit of graph. Was good at a sketchbook, but never take it to a rule. Couldn't break, couldn't rap. Tried rapping once, that was terrible. And I always wanted to start a band, but I couldn't find anyone that I wanted to start. You know, like, couldn't get a band together. So I just started like making beats, just making music on my own. And I was like, well, I'm doing like what people in hip hop do. So it became just a natural progression. Fell in love with the beat scene. Kind of started like 10 years ago or so. Like, kind of branched off, got hip hop, and then the beats just turned into my own thing. I know DJ Shadow and people like that were doing it in the 90s, but then it really took off, just making beats and shit. Yeah, NPC style. There's been things in Brighton. Brighton's been kind of good for years, but it got a bit cliquey. And now Worthing's kind of become this little kind of oasis of music and artistic people, and it's good to see. Like, who would have thunk it in this town that was previously like, you know, a bit dead.
Yeah.
It's really good, man. Things are popping off. It's nice.
It's a dynamic duo when we back again. Other rappers DJ, you better pack it in. You're lacking sense, trying to tangle with us. Go with the big bad bullies at the back of the bus, just smacking you up and stealing your lunch money and such. Buddy, you feeling just a touch hungry by the end of the day, that's understandable. What can I say? We got strong mandibles.
initially I just heard things like, you know, Grandmaster Flash, White Lines, and Herbie Hancock Rocket, things like that were just in the charts, I guess, when I was a kid. So that was probably the first hip-hop stuff that I heard. But at that time I was like 10 years old, maybe, sort of 83. So I was just listening to that alongside whatever other music was in the charts, you know, like most kids, just whatever was on the radio. And it wasn't until kind of 86, going into 87, that I sort of got exposed to more stuff, like the electro albums, for example. You know, Beastie Boys, Run DMC, Public Enemy, that kind of stuff that suddenly it sort of exploded a little bit in the UK, well, in America too, but certainly reached even where I was living in Southampton, which was half the battle. There wasn't much of a scene where I lived, on the outskirts. So anyway, yeah, kind of 86, 87 was where it really sort of took off for me. I got my first set of turntables when I was, I think it was when I was 16 or 15. I just left school. Yeah, no, sorry, it was my 16th, yeah, I just left school, 16th birthday, and as is the case at that age, you know, your family or whatever might give you a little bit of money in your birthday cards, and I sort of put all my money together with my mate Carl. We went 50-50 on a sort of a, you know, a built-in system, built-in system with the two turntables that were really, you know, the old belt drive and wobbled all over the place. I can't, what was the mixer? It was anyway, really old, you know, this is going back to like 89, I think. So that was the first setup, and then very quickly I realised that, you know, I was really, really serious about this.
Well, hello and welcome. If you can wipe your feet on the doormat, please come in on four, man. We got company. Where's my manners? Let me take you close. I hope you're hungry for some flavorful quote, which I whipped up myself. I'm really hoping that you like it. Quality and domino special light. I hate shit format. I think he's still in the kitchen, slaving over platters, you know, cooking rhythms.
I think all of us that were into it were really into it because it was, like I say, because of the place where I grew up. There wasn't a big scene for it, so it wasn't something that you just tagged onto because it was easy or it was cool. It was something that you had to really actively seek out, and so, you know, people always ask me about, oh, what about DJ battles or rap battles or graffiti battles and stuff like this when you're a kid. And I'm like, you're kidding, there was like hardly anyone into that stuff. If we found someone else that was in the, you know, the next town along or something like that, the instinct wouldn't be to try and battle them, it'd be like trying to befriend them. Oh my God, someone else is into hip-hop within a 20-mile radius of me. Brilliant, you know. That's, it sounds kind of corny now, but I just wanted more friends that were into the same kind of stuff as me. So, you know, yeah, I would say that all the people that I met at that time, we were all just as mad for it as each other, you know. It wasn't like, obviously nowadays you've got the internet, you just find out whatever history or you know, any back catalogue of music that you want to, just, you know, just at your fingertips any time. But back then, it was just this whole secret world that you know, you had to maybe know someone who had an older brother that maybe had some tapes or had just a bit more knowledge on it. That was the only way you could really, you know, find out about hip-hop and stuff. I moved to Brighton in about 90, either late 96 or 97. It's funny because I wouldn't say I was necessarily ever part of any scene. I kind of always wanted to be, I guess, but I never really was, or I never felt like I was. And the reason I moved to Brighton was because from going to hip-hop jams in Bristol, where we'd made some good friends, I actually met Arrow from First Down, from here in Brighton. And I was really getting into, you know, discovering breaks, digging for breaks at this particular time, you know, kind of 95, 96. And I think me and Arrow had started working on some music together at this time as well. And in the end, I just thought, I want to go to Brighton, you know, there's just record shops everywhere, and just bookshops and newsagents, like wherever you go, there just seems to be a crate of records in the corner on the floor, you know. And maybe my mate Richie getting an amazing Brazilian album with a massive break on it, just from like a newsagent that had a pile of records on the floor, you know. It's not going to happen nowadays, but anyway, that was what drew me to Brighton. It was just the fact that there were more record shops and more of a scene, but my idea of a scene, you know, like I say, it wasn't like, you know, we were really attending lots of hip-hop jams. There were things going on, but it wasn't like, I guess it wasn't like the good old days. It was, you know, because I'm talking about the sort of late 90s, you know, mid to late 90s. As we were discussing before we switched the camera on, you know, the fact that people of our generation, you know, of course, you grow up, your priorities in life change. Maybe you have kids or just greater responsibilities generally, and you can't just go out partying so much. Or maybe you just lose the desire to when you get older, and the next generation of kids coming through, they're not so interested in our old school rap and this soul and funk. They just want to hear the latest thing that's new and exciting to their ears, which probably isn't, you know, old school hip hop. So yeah, from my personal experience, I do find it difficult to say too much positive stuff about, you know, the so-called scene of, you know, the kind of hip hop that I'm into or that I want to hear, and the soul and funk stuff. But at the same time, I like to think that there are enough people out there. It's just it takes something a little bit different or a little bit special to get them out. It's just, you know, if you're just doing a typical small cool gig in a bar, it's very hard to motivate, you know, people to actually come along and have a drink and stay and party with you. Whereas if it, like, well, very recently I played a live show with Abdominal, and we sold out Patterns on a Thursday night, which, you know, was a great surprise to me, to be totally honest with you. I had no idea if enough people would care, if it would be, you know, a worthwhile gig, if it was going to be embarrassing. You know, you just don't know. It could be embarrassing. No one could turn up. You just don't know how it's going to go. No. But luckily, it was a great time, and again, it reminded me that no, there are a lot of people that want to hear this music.
My dad used to work at the Covent Garden fruit market, the new one, and he took me up to the West End to show the old Covent Garden. So while he's giving me a kind of tour of where he used to work as a kid, there was something happening in the square. There was, what I now know, there was guys breakdancing, and I stood there and watched them, and I looked at the stereo where the music was coming from, and I looked again, and I was back at the dance at the stereo, and the whole thing just overwhelmed me. Up to that point, I was just, you know, there was Shaking Stevens on top of the pops and stuff, and I had no idea what this noise was, what this energy was, what this sound was. And from that moment on, it never left me. A few weeks after that, every time I went to bed is what I was thinking of, when I woke up is what I was thinking of. And the thirst for just finding out what it was just huge. And then that was probably 82, 83 when I was like 13. And then it just kind of came in like snabs, and I heard The Message, then White Lines, and it just snowballed in the most amazing way. From then on, I was lucky to be in London, so I was half hour away from the West End, Hitman Records, Groove Records, Bluebird Records. We had LWR 92.5 with Tim Westwood, we had Spats in Oxford Street, and Covent Garden, which was a hub of everything. There was graffiti, Scribbler was up there, and there were breakers and there were poppers, and just to stand there and just take it in, you know, as a young teenager, it was my life, and it's been my life ever since. First up, it was Millie Mel. I heard The Message, and I ran out with my pocket money saved up for work party, purely for White Lines. But then when I heard The Truth, which was a track on there, which was more hardcore rap and cowboy, and Melly Mel on that. So they were my first kind of loves, I suppose, my musical loves. And then Run DMC just took over my life. I saw them Electric Ballroom in Camden, I think it was 84, 85. Sucker MCs on, I think it was Electro 4. And the Beastie Boys as well. And I've loved the Beastie Boys ever since. I mean, they're probably my favourite, because they just got better and better, reinvented themselves. Production boundaries, they pushed every single album I love. But soft spot, probably Run DMC. You know, the kings of rock and roll, the way they held themselves, the music, Jam Master Jay, that was just incredible. My best friend at the time was a graffiti artist, so I'd hold the cans of Bunt Lack and Cry Along for him, you know, and I was a lookout with
sleep in people's garages while we were doing pieces and stuff, which was great. But the music it was when I first started doing my first pause button mix, and it was like a whole new world opened up to me, you know, the kind of creative explosion in my head that I'd actually created something in my bedroom with a pause button and a double tape deck, and from then on I got my first decks that were belt-driven disco decks that were awful, and I got my SLs on high purchase with my mum as a guarantor, bless her. Got an old Roland sampler, keyboard and an Amstrad 4-track, and I just, every single night, every single week, track after track after track after track, yeah, I was just, I have to say, to me, hip-hop is a culture and a period from, you know, 80 to 93, 94. Personally, I believe the way, and all music evolves, I know that, all music evolves, but it just seems like from the mid-90s on they kind of took the name but forgot the music, they forgot the culture. I mean, there were some amazing acts kind of back in the trend, you know, Pete Rock, CL Smooth is a prime example there, just carried on in the vein that hip-hop should have been made. Hip-hop is a culture, hip-hop is more than a piece of vinyl, you know, it's a way of life, and that way of life stops for me in the kind of mid-90s. I said it was about a year ago, I tried to look on Facebook for a hip-hop page, and every hip-hop page I found was just F this, N that, motherfucker. I was just, oh my goodness me, so I thought, why don't I start my own page up? So I started up Hip-Hop Roots and History for something to do on the train, and just posting stuff that I thought was good, pictures, graffiti from around the world, breakbeats, tracks, old stuff, you know, and all of a sudden, not long later, I've got like 40,000 followers, and I was like, hang on a second, so maybe there isn't an appetite for, you know, what I call kind of proper hip-hop music. So, and then with technology as it is today, where you don't need to spend $2 grand in the studio and all this stuff, and so I've bought some hardware, Logic Pro and bits and bobs, started making stuff, releasing, you know, and all of a sudden I'm not quite sure what my end game is, but I'm now making stuff that I like. It turns out other people like it as well, and now it looks like these are going to be released on vinyl also, so it's just great. The page was started because I wanted to, it was almost like I don't know anyone. I played Drum Machine by MCA and Bazoosi in the car, you know, with friends and stuff. No one had ever heard of it. I was starting to wonder, am I the only person that knows this track? I can't, but you know, because it's one of my favourite tracks. I was just like that. So it was one of the first tracks that I posted, and all of a sudden people went, oh, I love this track. I was like, oh wow, so what about this one, what about this one? It kind of grew and grew. So then when I started making tracks, I was like, hang on, surely I can then post those here. Yeah, so it kind of reverse engineered itself into that. Yeah, it's kind of bringing the culture and the community back from all the you know, shuffle rappers that kind of swearing their heads off, you know. If that's what they want to do, then fine. Just please don't call it hip-hop.
In '87, we got tickets to see Public Enemy, Eric B. and Rakim, and LL Cool J, who were doing a triple bill at the Brighton Centre. Again, I was now 13 years old, pretty clueless what the hell I was going to wear, and quite intimidated by what this atmosphere was going to be like. Public Enemy came on with Uzis and in full camo gear and with an air raid siren. As anyone who knows the record will know, it's quite a loud noise, and yeah, we were scared. I thought, okay, Beastie Boys beat people up, they're going to kill us.
Are you ready? Let me hear you say yeah. If you really ready, let me hear you say hell yeah. Hell yeah. Let me hear you say yeah, boy. Yeah, boy. Everybody scream this shit real loud. One time. Let me hear you say Flavor Flav.
And in my naive little world, that's what we thought. But then Terminator X comes in, scratches the beginning bit, Professor Griff does his shouty bit, and bang, Chuck D comes on. Just the whole atmosphere of going in, and Cold Cut was playing bits and pieces, and just hearing the sound, this like electronic sound just coming at you the minute you went in. Literally, yeah, it was like Goose Pimples. Even thinking about it now, it's the same thing. It was amazing. Yes, everybody I think would have taken to the lino in the 80s. Great invention for kitchens and for b-boys alike. So when mum and dad were out, tables and chairs were pushed to one side, and you were trying to learn how to break dance. Headspins were a bit of a problem, ended up with doctor with a crook neck. Yeah, there weren't many people around to teach you. That was the whole thing. This was a very organic thing. Kids 2 or 3 years older than us were all teaching each other. We were out that loop. I'd heard about Nights at this Concord, and that it was kind of a really sort of how do I say it, like a nice atmosphere and spontaneous breakdancing. When I heard that word, I was like, what? Gotta check this out. I'd heard Cash Money on Westwood, it was still running, so if you wanted your weekly fix, you got on that, tape recorder, etc., get your tunes and then get into the scene. And then he had DJ Cash Money live, and I saw that when I was still living in Cornwall, moved down here and then thought, right, this is mixing the funk, so this is the music for the b-boys, you know, and this is, now I'm going to get into that side of things and really go from the core of what it's all about. Again, it was just seeing these faces around, like, oh yeah, maybe he looks really into it, look at his clothes, whatever, and then it was like growing up in this scene and thinking, yeah, you know, that's what I want to get to, etc. So yeah, it was organically growing, and we were really lucky. We had a plethora of DJs coming down at that time from London, people like DJ Business, Pogo. We had a local thing in Worthing and in Colonnade House in Worthing in Warwick Street, and that whole idea was great. And you saw, you know, 2 groups of like 20 different kids in each different group, and I was able to talk to people of literally from 5 or 6 to 90 years old, just looking at what's going on here. And from like 16-year-olds, when I started doing stuff like beatboxing and stuff like that in local community things and stuff like that, you had no idea the impact hip-hop was going to have on everyday life and as a culture that you were into, that it was ever going to last. I mean, when it first started, you know, people never thought it was going to last, so there you go.
I annihilate up. I annihilate up. I annihilate up. Momatic and just divine, a 2-piece combo. He on the percussion and me on the convo. Take you on the track through the mind of a master. Just give me a sec, I set it off right after the beat drops. Then I come back in with a vengeance. My sentences got the pen smoking like incense as I continue to spin through the mental to blend monumental essentials to sing you. O2, you should know by now, but if not, let me show you how I hold mine down. From the US, I represent what is true west, but furthermore, never settle for less. Yeah, another short shot banger for
I got stuck off the realness.
I mean, I've got an unusual history because my initial history with early hip hop wasn't here. It was in another place, you know, which had a very, very unusual thing because it had a few people, but everybody was so hungry and so dedicated it made it a very weird situation. You know, so you had guys that were older than me at school that would go. Like, I mean, the weirdest thing was a friend that I know has been doing loads of research on this subject, and it turns out that there's certain pockets around Britain that were into body popping and all that much before other areas. Now, the guys Tick and Tock, which are credited with being some of the earliest body poppers.
Opening the second half of the Royal Variety performance, here are Tick and Tock.
They did Robot and stuff like that. They were doing stuff with Gary Newman. Now, there's a guy that when I was a little kid, there was a guy who was in his 20s called Gav. Now, Gav was older than me and obsessed with Gary Newman. So very early on, well, in the late 70s, he would go and see Gary Newman and see all this unusual electronic stuff. And then in the early 80s, when Tick and Tock first started, he saw that and brought it to our town. You had another pocket of people that were really hardcore in places like Gravesend, you know, North Kent. No one ever talks about Gravesend, but it was a really prolific hardcore scene there. I remember distinctly, I know we're going slightly off topic, but I remember distinctly certain things that happened in the 80s, like DJ Clear, who was down with us, he had a certain style of scratching that was a bit like DJ Scratch's, you know, like slurring and very musical. His scratching was always musical. And then First Rate, who back then was called Blob, his style of scratching was really aggressive. But then when these two met, their styles were completely different, and over months, not days or weeks, you know, over months, their styles kind of adapted. And then they would have to go up against people like Prime Cuts, who was from Gravesend. And back then you had a gang of DJs from Gravesend, and Gravesend was the town with the best DJs probably in the UK. And you know, Pogo and Swift and all them were incredible. But I'm sorry, but no one was taking out Prime Cuts, and he's from Gravesend. You know, that's a madness. Round our way, we kind of picked up on early. We had this weird thing that every Sunday they had a nightclub that would be shut normally on a Sunday. They'd rent it out for under 18s disco. But the thing was, it wasn't really under 18s. That was just how they had to have it on the license so they could open. But this guy called Disco Gary, who was from somewhere like Maidstone, he realised that if he played a mixture of chart house and hip hop, he could pack out a nightclub on a Sunday from about 8 to half 10 or 7 to half 10. So it was just printing money. So every Sunday they had these things at the Top Rank Disco, the Top Rank Bingo Hall in Ashford, and then they moved it to the Dusties, and it was mental. And so you had this mad thing where everyone would travel to. So our scene was much more based around the music. So then when that closed, me and DJ Clear and Surprise, we bought our own sound system so that we could have our own set, so that we could go and rent out halls and put on parties. I moved to Brighton in '93 in May, but before that we'd carried on our jams, our assembly line jams. We'd carried on doing them, and I put on all sorts of mad concerts where we lived. I put on Blade concert, and then I put on a Hijack concert in Folkestone, and then after that I moved to Brighton. The only guys I'd met from Brighton, because I'd never actually been to Brighton my whole life, I'd only met the Deliverance guys, and they were really serious, and I really liked that, you know, because I was always dead serious about what I was doing. But by this point I'd already travelled on a train from Folkestone to go to the Battles of the Year in Germany, because I was really into breaking. I'd already gone to Paris to hang out with the Rocksteady crew when they put on their show, So What Happens Next in Suresnes and all this sort of stuff. So we were already really connected with really unusual people when all those things were really dead. You know, the Rocksteady crew couldn't have got a gig anywhere, but in Paris there was always that love for what was going on, so they managed to put on this whole theatre thing. You know, so because we lived in Folkestone, we would find out about all these unusual things, so we would go there. So then when we come to Brighton, again our thing was very different. So we come to Brighton, and Brighton was it was more like a big city mentality rather than where we were, because where we were we had to claw for everything, whereas Brighton, all the big gigs used to come to Brighton, whereas we used to have to go everywhere to them. So it was a bit different, but it was much more relaxed. And then all the hip hop nights used to play funk and hip hop mixed together. So again, all the girls would go. So I really liked it. Not because I was chasing girls, but because I just think the vibe of the party is better. And one of the reasons why I was into hip hop was because it was just a nice thing. It was fun, it was happy, you know, it was creative, and it kept everyone kind of involved. But then when it got all like hoodies and weed smoking talk and all that sort of Cypress Hill type moody rap, all the girls stopped going. They go to house nights and it was just a room full of dudes, you know, it's like Sausage Festival, load of old shit. So that really killed my enthusiasm. And when people look back at the 90s and they talk about, oh yeah man, 90s hip hop and all this, I'll be honest with you, I'm not saying it because I'm older, I'm saying it because I see the whole thing. The 80s rap parties were much better because it was loads of girls, loads of dudes, and people would dance. It didn't matter, you could be the toughest guy in there. If Uptown Dope and Plastic came on, you would dance, and everyone would dance. Now, I'm sorry, that is a better party than a load of dudes standing around acting tough. You know, that's a shit party. I think out of all of the elements in terms of trying to keep it pure to the origin, I think B-boy obviously is the origin because it's the attitude and it's the most visible display of the attitude. And I think hip-hop is impossible for hip-hop to die because it's an attitude, and it's an attitude that has always existed in everything. You know, people would have called it swagger back in the days, or panache, or whatever in the 60s. You know, you'd have had mods that walked into dances dressed in a certain way and would want to dance in front of everybody in a certain way and want to be the main peacock of the whole party, you know? And that has always been in everything. You know, like, even if you go back to, you know, whatever time, people always wanted to be the boss man of the thing. But b-boying gave people an opportunity you had nothing to be it. To be honest with you, I think the problem is that question of worrying about how to sustain hip hop or move it on. That question, you can't stick and keep four things together that aren't necessarily together. You know, let's be honest. DJs who were mixing two records needed the b-boys, and the b-boys needed those DJs. But the graffiti writer never needed them, and the rapper needed the DJ. But now the rappers are more famous than the DJs. The rapper can turn up and rap over a CD. He doesn't need the DJ. So rap has gone off in its direction. DJing has died effectively, and you know, it's become almost like jazz, isn't it? You know, like that stuff that some of them DJs doing. It's so like, you're just like, man, just make it sound good. I don't care how complicated it is. It sounds shit. It just sounds like a load of static noises. Just make it sound good, you know? And then b-boys are just going to carry on, and graffiti writers have gone off in their direction. So it's almost like rolling four wheels down a hill at the same time, and for X amount of years they stayed together. But over time, some wheels are going to go faster, some are going to drift off the road, some are going to do this, and that's all that's happened. So you've effectively made an unholy union between these four things, said they're meant to go together, and let's look at the person who said they should all go together. That person at the time was using his umbrella organisation to rape and attack vulnerable young dudes, you know, so the whole thing has got a sickness from the core. So the fact that it's stuck together as long as it has, I think is a miracle. So I respect b-boys, because I love it, I grew up with it, but then I also understand why some people that do graffiti couldn't give a shit. Like, if you're my type of age, or early 40s or late 30s or whatever, and you experience that era that you experienced, you just have to understand that that was what you had. Now, there's young kids now that are going, oh my days, did you see when Skepta done this? Did you see when Stormzy done this? Fucking amazing. For them, that is the most amazing thing that's ever happened. For them, that is like me seeing Rakim do something. But you have to understand, they're excited and young and interested and enthusiastic now about what they're interested in. So you cannot put your expectation on them. These bitter old white people that try and control how people see and view rap and hip hop, it was never invented for them in the first place. It was invented by black and Puerto Rican kids in the ghetto. You know, there were white people there, of course, but they weren't any key manoeuvrer in it. We were consumers. So the consumer never tells the business how to make the product. It's done. They've done it. We all enjoyed it. Move on. And that's all I see. If you want young people to like what you're doing, you have to make it fresh and new and interesting, in the same way rap was that to us in the early 80s. And if rap isn't that now, then the young kids won't listen to it. They're going to want to listen to what is fresh and new, and that's what they're doing.
Hip hop has influenced me in many ways. I'd say mostly because of what I listen to on a day-to-day basis. If it's not hip hop music, it's something which itself has been influenced by hip hop music. But I still listen to old stuff, and any offshoots of hip hop I'm still into. Everyday life, I still wear trainers, fat laces. It's just something that's made me who I am. I run a hip hop blog, mainly old school stuff, intended for late 40s, 50s, that sort of age group. People who came into the hip hop thing in the first rush of hip hop in the early 80s. That's what it's intended for. I got into hip hop around 82, and that was purely, I think, my dad. He came home one day with Grandmaster Flash and the Furious 5, The Message, and I pretty much learned the words within a few days. But I fell in love with rap, and it must have been around the same time as Malcolm McLaren and the world's famous Supreme team, Buffalo Girls, came out. It was a nice way of learning about hip-hop, from whatever we could learn at the time. It wasn't much. Records being scratched roughly in the Buffalo Girls video. Of course, the breaking, that really helped, and as well as the graffiti, so the visual part, it really helped. It helped me as a youngster get into it all. It was nice and bright, vibrant colours, and it was different. Up until then, I think I've been listening to two-tone, which was good, but this was even better. This would have been 1982, 83, 82, I say 82. I've stuck with it pretty much all the way. Hip hop is still going, if you look for it.
So let's get it together. We'll keep it on. Rock the house. Keeping it on. Rock the house. I keep it on. Rock the house. Keeping it on. Rock the house. I keep it on. Rock the house. Keeping it on. Rock the house. I keep it on. Rock the house. Keeping it on.
DJs running back and forth, a brand new rhythm in the parks after dark. We boys came to listen in shell-toe Adidas, fat lace sneakers. The techniques turned and bricks burned the speakers. Band rocked the place. The party was live. We talking 80, 81, no later than 85. But yo, I can't lie, my eyes were never blessed by the things that I'm living with rap. Resurrected.
When I was a kid, I was about 8 or 9 years old, so that was 1983, 1984. At the time, I was into sort of pop music, everything my older sisters were into, but then you hear certain songs on Top of the Pops, like Hey You, the Rock City Group. I remember particularly listening to The Message. It was on the top 40. I mean, it was on a Sunday afternoon. We'd come back from my dad's car one day in the seaside. From it was about 1983, right the way through to probably 94. Every part of my life was hip hop related. I was very fortunate where I was in Kent in Tunbridge Wells. There was a local DJ, Chris Kay, who was friends with Dave Pearce, who was, at the time, he was also Overlord X's manager. He started putting on huge jams. So for the, I think it was an 18-month period, I got to see Karis One, Kid and Play, who else? There was Ice-T, and these were all in our local town. It was ridiculous.
No problem, the record's revolving. Evil's the finger, I'm the rap sister.
Well, right now there's a lot of positive messages coming over in rap. The thing of it is sometimes packaged in a way that people just don't understand.
People think of rap as totally violent. They think of all the violence. They hear about violence at hip-hop concerts, but they don't want to. They don't hear about the violence at other concerts, like soul concerts or something. They just presume only hip-hop.
To really understand hip-hop, you have to realize that it's not something that's meant to be understood by everybody. The rap language that is slang is not meant to be understood by the parents. That's what makes it ours. That's what makes it the kids.
So you get to meet kids from all the different areas. I was fixated, and then went on, I think, about 1989, 90. There was a youth club over in Orpington. We used to go to a Friday night in the Pacific. We used to attract kids from all over South London. Then we had a brilliant record shop with Long Player down in Tunbridge Wells. Were really helpful. They play anything we wanted to. And actually from secondary school, my way home, I'd have to walk past that shop every day. So we'd go in there, and then you'd order the singles and the albums, knowing that on a Saturday you could come back and actually purchase it. There was radio shows, there was brilliant BBC, BBC Two stuff like Behind the Beat and reportage that were going on that were very hip-hop related. Throughout the years there's been some quite seminal moments, different albums. I think if I had to choose one, it'd be about 5 years ago when Public Enemy played the Brighton Dome. It was just after I launched my own agency called Don't Believe Hype, which was then actually inspired by the 7-inch single that I bought as a kid.
Don't believe the hype, right?
Thank you, man. It's always been beforehand. It was Brighton or London, stuff like that. But in all of these other towns, like I said earlier, I'm from Kent. There was Maidstone, there was Ashford. Each of these little towns had their own scenes, rappers, the dancers, the graph writers. So I don't see Worthing being any different. I think what's really good now is that probably because all these young families have moved into the area, we're all aging b-boys ourselves. So we're still maybe not so addicted to the scene as we once were because you're married and you've got a mortgage and stuff like that. But we've got this intrinsic passion, and that we're trying to distill into our kids. So like the stuff we're doing with the breakdance workshops and getting together, the writing, the stuff that we're doing with Top Rock and Beats, we can still take those essences of hip hop, the peace, love, unity and having fun, and distill it into something nice for the kids. So I think it's going to go on and on and on. And also that'll influence the kids of today. You know, there's some really nice young rappers that are 14 or 15, they probably haven't got a clue about what we were doing 20 or 30 years ago, but they're making their own scenes, they're making their own music, and doing really well. Yeah, it's not my cup of tea, but still they're keeping the scene alive, which has got to be supported.